Sam, thank you. And if we come to Deidre and then Glenda after that.
I don't feel that I've really dove into my terror really yet at all.
Yep.
But I'd really like some clarification on whether I'm actually mostly even skipping right over my fear. So I'm often getting triggered usually and feel anger and then start to really soften, and the tears come quite easily most of the time. And often I do feel like I'm crying to God and I'm afraid, but mostly it is just going straight into the tears. So, I'm just not sure whether I'm really just skipping right over a lot of fear in that process.
Yes, you're doing what many women do. If I can explain what many women attempt to do, and this is why many women don't progress as much as what they'd hope to, is because let's say this is sort of a timeline where here is your terror, let's call that your terror. Now your terror is going to block you towards any real processing of deep emotion. That's the reality. Your terror is there because you're avoiding pain, so there's your pain. Now, some of that pain is actually tears, but other pain is all sorts of emotions, shame and other sort of emotions like that are all related to the pain. There's also fear in the pain, like in your childhood, there's fears, childhood fears I'm talking about now. There's a whole heap of false beliefs in your pain, false beliefs about love and truth and so forth. So here we are here, and we go, okay, I'd like to progress, so what I'm going to do, because I'm real good at this, I'm going to do this.
Okay. So there's pretty much always going to be this terror block that's between those two places.
Always.
Okay.
Yeah, until it's released. And so therefore the pain is never really going to be truly experienced fully. And as a result, it's never going to be fully released. As a result, it's always going to, you're not going to experience major law of attraction changes in your life as a result, because you're only just letting out the bits you think you can cope with. Does that make sense?
I definitely feel like I've been selective with the pain I've experienced.
It was about letting out the bits you can think you can cope with. In other words, it's about letting out, for most people, they let out the bits they're not terrified about. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's what you're attempting to do. And in that process, you're trying to be selective. Now your soul's not built for selective emotion. So you're trying to work around how your soul's been made. Have you ever listened to the Q&As we did on the human soul, how it functions? Because it would pay to have a listen to those, because we talk about sort of 8 different qualities, I suppose, or aspects of the soul that govern how emotions are experienced. And what you're trying to do is be selective. You're suppressing one emotion while you're trying to experience another.
So even though there are some changes, like some small changes,
you will have small changes, but you won't have any
different.
large changes in your life. Just small little things, but no major critical changes while you do that. Yeah. And then after a while, the small things will dry up, because you'll end up, what most people do is they deal with the pain that they have no terror about, and there's only a little bit of that in any single person. And so what happens is eventually that all dries up, and from that moment on you'll go stagnant. You won't experience any more change. Does that make sense? And this is why most people get downhearted too with divine truth, is they start processing emotion, but it's only the emotion that they're not afraid of processing. So they process the emotion, or they have little fears, but not major terror, about emotion. So they process that emotion, but because that emotion, there's only a bit of that emotion, it all just finishes up drying up, and that's the extent of your progress, and that will be all your progress for the rest of your life, even after you pass, until you get through the terror.
So you go back to that block.
There's a good example in one of the channelings that Mary did before we started these series of assistance groups. You remember the lady who was a Mormon lady, and she passed. No, not Carolyn Brock. I'm talking about the channelling this year. There was a Mandy, her name was. We channelled Mandy, and she passed. She thought she had dealt with a lot when she passed. She passed, and she got involved in these groups who were teaching falsehood on earth and so forth. And eventually she degraded into a condition where eventually one of her friends would be plucked away, and another plucked away, and another plucked away, and another plucked away, and she was getting more and more terrified as she went, until she was alone and afraid of these spirits taking her away. And then she cried. Then she went through her terror. And at that moment, the bright spirits could grab her and help her. Does that make sense?
And so when you say that you're feeling like when you're being attacked, that triggers terror, and you just cry it out, like, are you releasing your terror then?
No, because there's causal terror that needs to be released. Well, what causes me to be attacked? So I've got to release what that's all about, right? So that's, and I've certainly released a lot of that. That's all about my first century life, and for me, all my memories, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah.
The trouble with this global emotion is, for most people on earth, the global emotion of terror doesn't have memories associated with it. And that's why you're resistive to feeling it. The global emotion of terror, for the majority of you have not had terrifying experiences all through your life. Right? The global emotion of terror, remember I said, a lot of global emotions are multi-generational, passed down from generation to generation. This is an emotion that entered you at the time of conception, and therefore there will be no memory of an experience of why you're so terrified. This is why you find it hard to deal with, because you're trying to address an emotion that you have, that you think you should have an experience of, that you haven't had an experience of, but you still feel it. Right? So the reality is, for the majority of people who are on the earth, and not all, but the majority, all people on earth begin with this global emotion of terror, and then in some countries where there is terror, of course, it just adds to it. There's events now that they can remember that add to their terror. But for the majority of people, particularly in Western society, the majority of people have not had events, or very many events at all, that have added to their terror. There've been some childhood experiences, but nothing that would justify the mountain of terror that we feel we have. You follow me? It's a multi-generational emotion passed down from generation to generation. At the time of conception, you won't have a memory associated with it. You just need to go through it. And most of you don't want to, because it confuses you greatly. You want you want to understand it before you feel it. You follow? Yeah. Now that these kind of emotions are going to have a powerful positive effect on your life if you feel them, because they've governed the rest of your life, right? They're governing emotions. They govern the rest of your life. But for the majority of you, there won't be. That's the reason why I broke it up into the three types of emotion. You've got the three types of governing emotion are the global emotions, the multiple event-based emotions, and the single event-based emotions. Now, what I'm suggesting to you, for the majority of you, there's no terror-based, or very few terror-based multiple event-based emotions, and there's a few terror-based single event-based emotions. But your global emotion of terror has come from generations past, passed down generation to generation. Everyone in society feels it, and most people do not want to experience it. Right. And most people don't want to experience it for a number of reasons. One reason is that you think you're going nuts when you're doing it. You don't have any memories associated with why it's there, and so you don't want to experience it then either. Whereas with single and multiple event-based emotions, there will be memories associated with those things. Do you follow? There will be memories because it's happened to you. Things have happened to you, and you'll remember what happened to you if you allow yourself to. And you'll go through the event. So it's like a person who's overseas and has been involved in a war zone, and there were bombs dropping, and there's a multiple event-based emotion that they can remember. But most of you haven't had that experience here in this audience, right?
So essentially, is that what the difference is between terror and fear? Is the intensity really comes from the fact that it is so...
Yeah, if you examine this diagram again, we've got our pain, then we've got our false beliefs and false definitions of love. There's our fears, There are our individual fears about love and our individual fears about truth there, right? But we've got this global terror, this global emotion, capping all of that. It says just don't deal with any of it. Don't deal with pain. Don't deal with any emotion. There's this global belief system that's been passed down from generation to generation. That's the one we're making the decisions with. That's the one that triggers the facade, right? Triggers the creation of the facade. It's this one here that we need to start to address. And this one is all about denying this and denying this, of course. It suppresses it. It keeps it all down. You follow? So it's really important that we see that this particular emotion is not necessarily an experiential emotion in the sense of a multiple event experience or a single event experience. It's an emotion that's in you now, passed down from generation to generation, multi-generational emotion. It's in you now. It's got to be released, and it's controlling most of your life.
That makes a lot of sense.
That makes sense?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so for the majority of people, they feel a bit of fear about a particular event in their life, and then they have a connection with the emotion. But while this global terror exists about emotion, and it's about emotion, about feeling anything, about being overwhelmed by anything, every single experience is going to be difficult to have. And this is what you're encountering. The majority of you are encountering. It's difficult to even get to one emotion, and the reason why is because this global emotion exists, and none of you have been willing to feel it. Yeah. And I'm saying at this stage, Mary's now going through it, but no one else has. So, and many of you might think you have, and those who are listening might think they have, but not yet, you know. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yep.